All right. Welcome to the Letters of Evaluation session. This session is going to talk about getting the requirements, getting your letters, the process for it, and just a little bit about the specifics of our committee letters so that you know what will be sent out to the different schools. So you have an understanding of what's going to be used in your letter. So in terms of the types of letters that we have three types of letters. There's a committee letter, a letter packet, and individual letters. We recommend and hope that folks who have not, who have been at Northeastern recently or are within 3 years of graduation get a committee letter. The committee letters include the full content of all of the letters that you turn into us. They require that you meet all of our deadlines and requirements, and I know we do have a lot of deadlines and requirements, but they are what most of the schools are looking for. So most of the schools will be wondering, if you don't have a committee letter, why don't you have a committee letter? It is well worth it to go through the steps. Although we do have a lot of steps, we've designed those steps to help you be successful in your application process. So to help you with self-reflection and thinking about who you are and all the things you've accomplished and what you've learned, and help you put together an understanding of what the schools are going to look for. If you miss a deadline, you can still qualify for a letter packet from the pre-health program. The letter packet includes the full content of all the letters in a packet with a cover sheet. It requires that you meet all the requirements on the applicant agreement, and I'll go over those in a second. It's an option for people who miss a deadline or for people who don't want to, do all of our paperwork and all of the things that we do require. Like I said, we recommend that you do them because we put those requirements together to help you be better prepared for your application and for your interviews. And then for folks who have been out of school for more than 3 years, you can choose to apply with individual letters and have those individual letters sent directly to the application. So you would not have those uploaded into MAP. Instead, you would just send them in directly to the schools. The reason that some alumni choose to do this is that we do have pretty strict requirements for our committee letters. So we require 3 faculty letters from Northeastern. We require a clinical letter, and we allow 2 additional letters. After you've been working a certain amount of time, you may not feel that that's the best representation of who you are. So you may feel, well, 3 faculty letters, that maybe only 2 faculty letters and 4 external letters because I have so much work experience. I feel like that's a better way to talk about, who I am. Obviously, since you're applying to an academic program, you do have to have some academic letters. So what are the committee letter requirements? You guys have probably heard this before, so I'm just going to go through this pretty quickly. We require 3 internal letters. Internal letters are letters from faculty, and 1 to 3 external letters. So for the faculty letters, we require 2 BCMP, biology, chemistry, math, or physics faculty, and then the third is your choice. A lot of people decide they want a letter from somebody outside the sciences to kind of highlight a different side of themselves. You get to decide. Faculty must have taught you in a course or a directed study and given you a grade. We don't allow TAs or 1-credit courses to count for those letters because they don't have enough content. If you have a TA that you got along really well with and you want a letter from the faculty member who taught the class, a lot of the time the TA and the faculty member will collaborate on the letter. So you can mention to the faculty member, I got along really great with the TA. I spent a lot of time working with the TA, and they will sometimes talk to each other if that's something that you feel like would be useful. So TAs can contribute to those letters. They're still students themselves, though, so they're not really yet qualified to write the letters. we require an external letter from a practitioner in the field that you're applying to. So an MD for MD applicants, a DO for DO applicants, a dentist for dental applicants, people who are applying to optometry and veterinary schools, you're going to need an optometrist or a veterinarian. Those programs don't typically require committee letters, although we're happy to talk to you about that. If you're thinking you might apply MD and DO, you would need an MD letter and a DO letter. And that's something, how you're going to organize your letter packets or your committee letter is something that you would talk to us about. But if you are applying to MD programs and DO programs, know that you'll need a letter from each of those clinicians. Sorry, we have a question. Can I swap out a letter request for an external letter? So sorry, Ashley, if you want to send me an email about this is probably something that would be specific to you. So we'll just need to double check and look at what's going on with your letters and who you have letters from. We allow up to 2 additional letters. Some people do get those additional letters. A lot of people who have done research like to at least have a research letter. It's not required that you have additional letters. It is nice to have those, but the medical schools don't want to read things that aren't, really informative. So don't add letters just to add letters. In terms of the psychology classes, what counts for psychology classes are the psychology classes that are BNS classes, basically. They're very biology heavy in content. So biological psychology, sensation and perception, biological endocrinology. So there is a list on the BNS website, and I can point you to that information if you send me an email. The one thing I would recommend is that you look at the school-specific websites and see what they're looking for, if they specify what they want, who they want letters from. Some of the schools are really particular about who they want letters from. Others just say a committee letter. We will accept letters from the BNS faculty, but you just want to make sure that that's going to be the best letter to meet the needs of what the schools are looking for. So for committee letters, you need to meet all of the deadlines and all of the requirements, and all the deadlines are on the applicant agreement. They're listed here again. You guys know January 31st is the deadline for the applicant agreement and the self-assessment, and those need to be uploaded on MAP. Letters of evaluation are due on March 15th, and you need to make sure to let your letter writers know that that's the deadline. The email that they get from us will not say that March 15th is the deadline. So make sure that you tell them that March 15th is the deadline. We don't put it in there because it could at some point change. By April 15th, you need to request a committee letter interview. And in order to request a committee letter interview, you need to make sure that all of the sections of MAP are filled out. So the grades are included. You have a copy of your personal statement in there. The 3 essays are submitted, and all your activities and interests are included in there. In terms of the length of your additional essays, it allows you to have, I think it's 5,000 characters. Don't feel like you need to write 5,000 characters. The same with the self-assessment. Use the space that you need to use in order to explain what you've done. Longer is not necessarily better. We appreciate concise writing as much as the medical schools do. So we give you 5,000 characters in case you have a lot to say, but you certainly do not need to use it all. So by April 15th, you need to request a committee letter interview through MAP. Once you're approved for that committee letter interview, you'll go on your MyNEU and you'll set up your committee letter interview appointment with either Dr. Begley or myself. And you'll see those appointments available on the MyNEU portal. We do sometimes switch appointments around, just kind of looking at workload and time commitments and all of that. So it's possible that once you set up your committee letter, you could receive an email and requesting to change it, just so you're aware of that. The last day to submit your application is July 31st. Obviously, we recommend submitting it earlier. June 2nd is a really good day to submit your application for MD programs. Dental school, the applications usually open around June 1st or so, July 1st for optometry. The DO programs last year opened in the beginning of May, and right around May 15th was about when people started submitting them. That was what we figured out was pretty advantageous for submitting the DO applications. For letter packets, again, letter packets have the same letter requirements as committee letters. You just don't have to make the same deadlines for that. And then the individual letters, you upload them. There are no specific requirements. You don't request those through MAP. It's an option mostly used by alumni who have been out of school for a little while. Admissions committees may ask you why you don't have a committee letter. The same is true with letter packets, and you just want to be able to give them a logical explanation. For some people, it doesn't make the most sense to use a committee letter. So who should you ask? For internal letters, science faculty who have taught you in a lab class, if you know them, are the best option, because the admissions committees want to know how you will do in classes that are like what you'll take in your medical or dental school program. So you want to be able to have somebody who's taught you in a sort of a similar or foundational class talk about how you were in one of those classes. You at least want somebody from your major. You want at least somebody from outside of your major. You don't want 3 letters from the same person or from the same major, from the same field. You want people who will talk about different sides of who you are. You want your your package or portfolio of letters to demonstrate that you get along with a wide variety of faculty, that you establish relationships with a wide variety of faculty. So people often ask me, what kind of things do faculty talk about in the letters that they're writing? And so I looked through a whole bunch of letters and I pulled out some of the sentences that were really strong sentences and are the kind of things that the medical schools are really looking for, the admissions committees are looking for when they're reading those applications and reading the letters. And these are some of the descriptors that I pulled out from faculty letters. So these are the kinds of things that you want to have demonstrated in the classes of people who you're asking for letters. For external letters, obviously you need a clinician in the field to which you're applying, somebody who's seen you in a clinical setting in the U.S. in the last 18 months, obviously not a relative or family member. We recommend against people who have known you your entire life, because those tend to come off as too subjective as opposed to being really objective about who you are and your abilities. Other letters, so the optional letters, you can ask a PI or a lab head, work supervisors, community service supervisors. You want people who can talk about the AAMC competencies, so the things that the schools want to know about, your ability to work on a team, your communication abilities, are you reliable, do you take feedback and improve? So those different competencies. You also want to make sure, again, that you're asking a portfolio of people for letters. So if you've worked in one lab, you don't necessarily want to ask 2 PIs from the same lab or 2 people from the same lab. Sometimes instead of asking 2 people from the same lab, you'll ask them if they will write a collaborative letter. So the 2 people can write 1 letter between them. You don't want 2 people who are going to write the exact same thing about you. the schools appreciate brevity, and so they would like to read it once and once only. If somebody says something about you, they're going to believe it. So don't have letters just to have letters. Instead, choose people who know you well and are going to be able to talk about different sides of you. So clinical letter you definitely need. A research letter, if you've done research, is nice to have. And then in addition to that, like a job supervisor, community service, if you've done two types of research that have been kind of different, that's a good idea. Or, if you've done two different research projects, even if they've been similar, but they're big names, who would write you letters, obviously it doesn't hurt to have somebody who's well known in the field write you a letter. So in that case, it's not a bad thing to have a little overlap. But again, I looked at external letters and kind of descriptors that people use in those letters and positive things that they said about applicants and letters. And these are some things that I pulled out. And people often wonder, if I just shadowed, are they going to have things to say about me? And yes, a lot of these things are really things that an MD, a dentist, a DO, an optometrist, a veterinarian can get about you from just a shadow experience. Well, I say just in air quotes. All right, process. We do recommend that you run your anticipated list of letter writers past the pre-health office. It's on the self-assessment sheet. You can also just email a list to me if you'd like an answer right away. I'll be looking over the self-assessments, but that probably won't happen until the beginning of February. So we are asking you to do that, not because we're control freaks, although we are a little bit, but mostly we want to know that you're not making a mistake in who you ask for letters. So some of the biggest mistakes that we've seen people make in the past are asking a one credit course person or asking all people from the same major. Those are things that the schools aren't going to really be as impressed with as a well-rounded portfolio of letters. So once you have the okay from us on who you're asking for letters, the first thing that you want to do is talk to your evaluator about are they willing to write you a letter? And what a lot of people will do is they'll email the person to set up an appointment to discuss the letter and say right in the email, I'm wondering if I can set up an appointment with you to talk about a letter of recommendation for medical school. That kind of gives the person an out if they don't feel comfortable writing you a letter, or if they just feel like, oh my goodness, I don't have the time. Or if they're a science faculty and they're thinking, I have just taken on too many letters, I'm full, I can't write one more letter. It gives them the opportunity to just say, I'm sorry, I don't think I would be the best person to write you a letter. And that way you're not one-on-one asking them about it. So that way you can kind of get that first piece out of the way through setting up the appointment. When you go in to meet with them, bring a copy of your transcript, your resume, your personal statement if it's done. There's a link here to AAMC letter guidelines. There's a brochure. There's a really good brochure that explains to people what to write about in a letter. This is particularly important for the external letter writers and the non-science faculty. A lot of the science faculty have seen the guidelines and are pretty familiar with the letters. It doesn't hurt to bring it for them just to show your preparedness. But this is a really good resource for people who don't write a lot of medical school letters. You're going to sit down with them, talk to them about, your goals, who you are, remind them of how you know them, how you did in the class. You have a conversation about it. And then at the end, you just say, are you going to be okay writing me this letter? If everything goes according to plan, you'll then go back after that conversation, into your MAP portfolio, and you'll request the letter through the evaluation section. So it's very easy to do. You go into the evaluation section, you put in their information, their name, their email address, their professional email address, other contact information, how you know them, their title, all of that. And then MAP automatically sends them a request saying you've agreed to write this letter, make sure again that they're aware of the deadlines when you talk to them. They'll receive an email with a link. When they click on that link, it will verify their email address, and then when they finish the letter, they'll just use that link to upload the letter right directly into MAP. Now, the way that you know that your letter has been received is you'll go into MAP and you'll see when you send the letter, it will be listed as sent. When the letter is received, it will be listed as awaiting for verification. Letters must be received and awaiting verification by the March 15th deadline. So that means that the letter writer has to upload the letter by March 15th. Now, I will warn everybody that last year I got about 100 letters on March 15th. Letter writers are exactly the same as students. They will put this stuff off until the last minute. That doesn't mean that they're not going to do it. It does cause a lot of anxiety among students, and I'm sorry about that. There's not really anything, unfortunately, that I can do. The letters do need to be in by the March 15th deadline. If there's some extenuating circumstance, either please have your letter writer talk to us. So, for example, if your letter writer is suddenly called away for a really important conference and they're going to be out of the country and they can't do it, we'll certainly talk to letter writers if they have some problem that's come up and they want an extra, whatever. Those requests have to come from the letter writers, though. In the most part, this is a very, very strict deadline. If your letters are not in on March 15th, then you won't qualify for a committee letter. So you really need to emphasize that to the people when they're writing or when you're talking to them about the letters. So once the letter is in, like I said, it says it's awaiting verification. I read all of the letters that have been submitted. So I make sure they have the correct date on them, especially around this time of year. People sometimes write 2015 instead of 2016. I make sure they sign the letters. I make sure there aren't typos in them, that they haven't called you by the wrong name or said he when you're she. So I will go through and read every single letter. Once I've read the letter and said, yes, this letter is great, then I will mark it as verified. Verification can occur after March 15th. All of your letters do need to be verified before you're able to request your committee letter interview. If there's a problem with the letter, I will typically get back to the letter writer directly, although sometimes I do get back to the student and say, can you just talk to your letter writer about X, Y, and Z? If it's a typo, I'm not going to get back to you. I'll get back to the letter writer directly. So once your letters are verified, your MAP profile is complete, you can request your committee letter interview. And actually, this note, you can only ask for letters that you plan to use. You're not allowed to ask for, 7 letters or 8 letters and then pick and choose which ones you want to use. And that's because it's not very considerate to the letter writers. One day you guys will be writing letters and you'll realize they're a lot of work, and people don't mind doing that work, but once they've done that work, we want to use the letter. So we do require that all letters be used. If you're applying MD and DO, you can have 7 letters. So you'll have, maybe you have a research and a community service and an MD letter and a DO letter. And we would send the MD research and community service to the MD program, and then the DO research and community service to the DO program. But other than that, you're pretty much limited to 6 letters. Sometimes we'll allow updates on letters, like if you were planning on applying and then, you defer a year. And that's a conversation that you would have directly with me. So committee letters so you'll request your committee letter interview. Committee letters are actually written after you apply. So, and letter packets, the same thing. They're part of the secondary application. So you'll request your committee letter interview. You'll have your committee letter interview by May 15th, either with Dr. Begley or myself. It's a small committee. It's just going to be one of us. And you'll set up your appointment via your MyNEU account. So once you get the okay from me that yes, everything looks good, you can set up your committee letter interview, then you'll go online to your MyNEU account, pick the person that you want to interview with and the time. We do sometimes have to switch things around. I think I might have said this before, just based on our schedules and what's going on in workload and stuff like that. So be aware. It's possible you could get an email from one of us. It doesn't usually happen, but we don't like to take people by surprise on that. So just so that you're aware, you could have a change in that. So you'll have your committee letter interview. You'll apply. You have to apply by July 31st. We recommend, obviously, that you apply as soon as possible. As you know, applying earlier is better. Once you submit your application, you'll download a copy of it with a date time stamp for MD programs and just a copy of it from the DO and the dental and the other programs. You'll upload that onto MAP, and then you'll email either Dr. Bagley, well, you'll probably email both Dr. Bagley and I and say, I'm applied, my application's uploaded, and I'm ready for my committee letter to be written. That is when we write your committee letters. So we don't write your committee letters until you've notified us that you've applied and uploaded your application. MAP does not notify us that you've uploaded your application. And we'll go over this again during the committee letter interview, just as a reminder. So the reason that we write the committee letters after you have applied is that some people do decide to defer at the last minute. Either they get an MCAT score that they don't want, or they get a really great job offer. They just decide for whatever reason they're not ready. So we want to spend our time writing the letters for people who apply, not for people who maybe are applying next year, because next year we would write a different letter because you'd have a year's worth of experience. We also don't write committee letters until you have your MCAT score. Question, if you no longer have access to your MyNEU account, is email the best way to schedule a committee letter appointment? Yes. What you would want to do is once you have the okay that yes, you can set up your committee letter appointment, email both Dr. Begley and I and say, all right, remind us, I don't have access to my MyNEU account. I'm approved for a committee letter interview, and send us 3 days and times between, basically 9 to 5 that would work for you. Also, we do, if you're not in the Boston area, we do Skype appointments for committee letter interviews, just so that you're aware. You don't have to fly to Boston for a committee letter interview if you're not in the area. We can do that interview with you via Skype, so we can do it electronically. So just to kind of let you know what the format is for our committee letters. The committee letters are going to be comprised of the following. There's going to be a cover page, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. Then either Dr. Begley or I will write a letter based on all of the stuff that you've turned in. So your self-assessment, everything you've put into MAP, your application and the notes that we've taken, and the committee letter interview itself. So we have a lot of information about you, and we'll use that to write our piece of the committee letter. We then attach to our piece the complete text of the faculty letter, and above that we include their name, degree, title, and department. And then we include PDF copies of the external letters from all of your external letter writers. Some schools use quotes from the letters. We include the full full content of all of your letters, internal and external. And everything is combined into a single PDF. Typically, it winds up being about 7 to 8 pages. So it's a pretty extensive evaluation about you. So last Friday, Dr. Bagley and I were really lucky to have the opportunity to go to a professional development day at Tufts University and hear from admissions deans. So we heard from 5 admissions deans, the dean from BU, from Tufts, from UMass, from Quinnipiac, and then an admissions committee member from Dartmouth. And then we also had a tour of Tufts and talked to some students. And based on their input, we're making some minor changes to our letters. They're not going to be changes that impact anything with, with your deadlines or anything like that. We're going to include a cover page that explains the process and requirements and all of our deadlines to be really transparent with the schools about what we're requiring so they understand how much work you've put into this entire process. We've always included in our letters information about the co-op program and the rigor of summer classes, that students take classes from the same faculty with the same syllabus in the summer. We're going to move that to the cover page. The cover page is also going to indicate the type of letter attached, and if you have a letter packet, we're just going to say right on that cover page why you have a letter packet. A lot of admissions people have been calling me over the last year asking, well, why does so-and-so have a letter packet? Can you give me more information about it? And we want to eliminate them having to take that step because it takes time for them to do that. So we want them, while they're sitting at a committee meeting, to be able to just say, oh, okay, this person missed a deadline. They have a letter packet. So just so that you're aware of that. Some schools don't give committee letters to people who have a GPA below a certain point. We don't do that. Or some schools don't do committee letters for people who have institutional actions. We don't have access to that information. So schools could be making assumptions about why you don't have a committee letter, and we just want to be really clear about that. All of the deans who were present expressed that they liked letters that gave a lot of information in a short space. Basically, they don't want to be reading 20 pages of letters. Our letters are pretty concise, but just to kind of be aware, if you have somebody you're thinking, well, should I ask this person for a sixth letter or should I not? Think about, is this really going to add to your application? If you think that that person is really going to add information, add something new about you, then yes, go ahead and ask them. But don't ask for a letter just to have a letter. Only ask for a letter if you think it's going to enhance your application. There are plenty of people applying with only 4 letters, the 3 faculty letters and the clinical letter, who just do just fine. And one other thing that we were happy to hear, all 5 of the deans and the people who were there said that all of the letters were read, usually by more than one people. BU said that they actually start and end reading the application with the committee letter. UMass said that they have 2 people read the entire application, and then those 2 people present it to the committee. So you can see that there will be people reading everything from your letters, not just the committee letter, not just focusing on any one component of it, but they will read your entire application, which was good to hear. What did deans say they wanted to know? So these are some things that they said were particularly important for them to know. And obviously, since they're saying that, Dr. Begley and I are going to be focusing on this information, which we always have, but it gives us some information to frame around. The deans said that they wanted to know your profile, life story, distance traveled. I have underlined here resilience and how you react to struggles, because they said that so many times and so vehemently that I starred it like 3 times in my notes. This is a little bit of a hint for you guys. When you're coming to your committee letter interview, we may ask you questions about these things. So you probably want to think about maybe some stories or maybe an incident that you can talk about. For some of you guys, it'll be really easy to think about a time that you struggled. A lot of you guys have had medical problems, or you've had difficult circumstances with your family, or you have something that you could talk about. A lot of you guys have not, which is a nice thing. And you may have to think a little bit harder about something that demonstrates resilience. It doesn't have to be something major. What the admissions people said was that, when you're thinking about medical school, it's hard. And studies have shown that people who are resilient are most likely to be successful in medical school. So they're looking for a demonstration of past resilience to indicate future resilience. So they're looking to see, how do you handle stressful situations? When the going gets hard, if you're struggling in a class, what do you do? Do you go to tutoring? Do you go talk to the professor? Do you go to extra office hours? Do you spend extra time in the library? Um, or do you just give up and say, oh, this professor was ridiculous? Um, would it be beneficial for a professor to write about improved grades if I had a professor for 3 courses, each with increasing difficulty? Yeah, I mean, that might be something where a professor could talk about your resilience and how, maybe you struggled a little bit in the first class, and then, you really stuck to it, you incorporated feedback, you really worked hard, you came to office hours, you got tutoring. So, I mean, it's great to have somebody else talk about how you're resilient, because that's something that they have clearly indicated is important to them. And the fact that a faculty member can say, yeah, things were not super easy for this person the first time, but he or she really stuck with it, really improved, and I was really impressed with their abilities by the time they got to the third class. They also want to, I mean, the overview of academic work they want to know about. They also want to know about, what were the important commitments? How did you spend your undergraduate time? They're really interested, again, in who you are, what kinds of things interest you. A lot of people have spent time doing things that are not medically related. You've had large commitments. You've been president of a club that's not medically related. You're really musical. You like sports. You have been in plays, you're in the student newspaper. That's great. That's stuff that they're really interested in as well. If you commit to things that aren't even, quote, aren't even helping your application, it shows that you're somebody who feels passion for things and dedicates themselves to things that they feel passionate about. If you're somebody who hasn't really committed to anything, that's something that they're less excited about. They want to know about institutional actions and disciplinary matters. We don't have access to anything from Northeastern. We don't have access to your disciplinary records, but that's something that we can talk to you about. If you got caught with, an open can of beer when you were a freshman, I mean, that's not going to keep you out of medical school. Or, you had a noise violation, you were playing your stereo too loud. Again, not going to keep you out of medical school. If there's something that's bigger, though, we need to really talk about that and think about, how do we put that in context? And then they want to know, how was the committee letter interview? And that is really more just kind of getting a sense of, what kind of person are you to work with? How has it been working with you for the past few years? And that's not, oh yeah, we're not going to be like, oh yeah, she was great, or oh, no. But just more, oh yeah, she's really outgoing, enthusiastic, or, she's a quiet and thoughtful person. So just kind of getting a sense of the type of person that you are. A few final notes that I want to bring up. One thing that is really, really important, don't stalk your letter writers. I've had people say, I've emailed my faculty member 6 times and they haven't written the letter still. That's not going to help. If, ask them for the letter. If they say they're going to do it, you have to expect that they're going to do it. People don't say that they're going to do it if they're not, typically. If they haven't written that letter a couple of weeks before the deadline, send them a friendly reminder just saying, I know you're really busy and sometimes these deadlines can, slip to the back of your mind. I just want to remind you that the deadline is coming up March 15th, and I hope that this is still something that you can do. And then if it's a couple days before, you can also send them 1 second reminder saying, just want to make sure there's nothing else you need. But don't be sending them 5 or 10 emails. That will really be irritating to them. Make sure to thank your letter writers when they upload your letter. So when you see it's uploaded, send them a thank you note. And then also keep in touch with them about acceptances and where you matriculate. It really makes a difference to letter writers, especially some of the science faculty who are really spending a fair amount of time writing these letters. If they're writing a lot of letters, it helps them a lot when they hear back from the students who are saying, I really appreciated the fact that you wrote me this letter, and it helped me to get into X school. It helped me to get into my dream school. It makes the faculty feel really great, and frankly, it helps you to stay in touch with them. Remember, once you start into medical school and you're out working, these are people who are, going to be your colleagues in the future, so you want to keep in touch with them. Dr. Begley and I remind you that we are your letter writers too. We love to hear updates. We love to know how you're doing. We see the information in the portals later because we require that you release that information to us. But we really do want to know how things are going, and we appreciate those updates. It's important to note letters submitted to our office can only be used for the purpose that they were submitted. So they can only be used for medical, dental, optometry, podiatry, and veterinary school. Sometimes people change their minds and they decide, they're going to apply to some other type of program. They're applying to a PA program. Sometimes people decide they need to do a medical master's program to improve their grades a little bit, or they decide they want to do something in a gap year. They want to apply to Teach for America, the Peace Corps, or whatever. We're not able to send your letters to those programs because the letter writers send them to us with a specific purpose. It's that letter writer's name and signature on the letter, so they're the only ones who get to decide what they're recommending you for. They've recommended you for medical school. I don't then get to turn around and say, oh yeah, they also recommend you for the Peace Corps, and I think they think you'd be great for this research position. That's their decision and not my decision. If the letter, so you would need to get back in touch with the letter writer and ask the letter writer to send the letter there. If they no longer have a copy of the letter, at the letter writer's request, I can send that letter back to them, so I do have a copy of the letter. A final few notes: if you can't obtain the full set of letters, the 3 faculty letters and the clinical letters, please don't request any through MAP. We're not going to send out incomplete packets. We don't do uploads for anything other than a complete letter packet or a committee letter. We won't upload 2 letters, so make sure that you have the full packet. Otherwise, you're going to have to ask the letter writers to upload them to the application service. Also, if you decide to apply DO after applying MD, you will need a DO letter, no exceptions. So if you think you might want to consider DO programs, explore the field now, get to know a DO so that you won't be left in a position where you're running around trying to find a DO a little late in the game. So that's the general information. I know that's a lot of information for everyone. Are there any additional questions that anyone has about the application process or the letter process, getting the letters, how to talk to your letter writers, anything that we've gone over? Anyone? Okay, so I don't see any questions. If you do have any questions that come up after this, definitely feel free to send me an email or set up an appointment. Also, if you're just, you're in the process and you just want to make sure that you're on track with things, definitely feel free to set up an appointment to come in and talk to me. If you're not in the area, we can do a Skype appointment or a phone appointment, and I'm happy to go over things and just make sure that you're solid on the deadlines and what's happening coming up. And otherwise, I look forward to seeing the letters coming in, and I look forward to our committee letters coming up. So thanks for attending, and I will talk to all of you guys soon.